Hey everybody, what's up? We're doing something new today. I was in the middle of a social edit, and some news hit late on Thursday. We already picked our stories for the week, but it's not gonna fly because there's some news that came out about E3 going all digital. And to help me talk about it here today, we've got a special guest, Kahlief Adams. What's up, dude?
What's up, dude? Good to see you. I'm excited to get a chance to rock and hang out. It's going to be fun to talking about all the things that are bubbling and popping up in the industry. So let's get it in.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we haven't gotten to do one of these for a while, so I'm excited too.
I missed you, fam.
Yeah,
I missed you, brother.
It's also ironic because I think you and I were the last E3 we were at was the actual last in-person E3 that we worked together to work on some Spawnomy content, right?
I mean, we actually set the precedent for what the last good content to come out of E3 was. So I think we decided and we were like, you know what, we're done. We finished all our stuff, end out on a bang, and now E3 is doing all the digital things. So we'll see. And
now it can die. Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. So late on Thursday, a story came out of VentureBeat that said, looks like E3 is shifting to a digital-only event, but there's also been reports that's that event is still also uncertain. They just won't be having a in-person E3 this year, right?
Yep.
That pretty much covers it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we've seen what has happened in the past couple of years. I think last year was an interesting kind of foray into what that thing looks like from an all-digital perspective. I think we've seen what the previous years were having. In terms of kind of lacking content and a lot of big publishers moving away from doing that show and doing their own show. So this feels like the kind of, best evolution of what is going to happen for E3 moving forward.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I don't know. I'm two minds about it, right? Because when I first heard the news, right, the VentureBeat article came out and a bunch of follow-up articles came out with the quotes saying that the reason that they were, obviously not going to do an in-person E3 is because of COVID, the rise in outbreak cases and things like that. And, that's logical. I mean, they're so much further ahead of the game this time than they were, right, in 2020, where it just seemed like everyone was waiting till the last minute to cancel their events. And it seems like forward thinking, but then I saw, Rebecca Valentine over, I think she's at IGN, great reporter, who was saying hey, I've been working on this story for actually a few months now, trying to figure out when E3 is actually going to be, if it's actually going to happen. And she was like, there's no confirmed dates for an E3 event at all. So now a lot of people are very doom and gloom. Everyone in the industry on Twitter was joking yeah, because of COVID, right? This is the death knell for E3. And that's been a running joke. I feel like since 2016, we were hearing rumors that they were going to at least get out of the LA Convention Center. And then it was things aren't going hot with ESA. And then, they had the debacle when they had to cancel. And then there was the back and forth where they had a falling out with I Am 8-Bit or whatever about planning the online event or a physical event that became an online event. So yeah.
I mean, even the last E3 that we went to, to a certain extent, when we were trooping around the floor, there was a lot of gaps in terms of folks who had bought booth space, which is usually premium stuff, right? It's one of those things of if you can get a space for E3 and you can get a booth floor, you're solidified within having your space in there. And I know when we were going around looking for content and setting up things for Spawnomy stuff, there was huge gaps on the floor with no booths there. We lucked out and had full spaces for us to be able to record content and do that kind of stuff. So even back then, it was the conversation was, is this the last E3? Are people going to come back to this? Is it going to be done? And it still feels like the answer is still up in the air. And even if it isn't, what is this show going to be? It's changed. Certainly
getting a little bit empty in those halls. People, recording podcasts on the actual show floor and things. We've seen, industry veterans and things doing that sort of thing. Just being we've never been able to do this before because there's too many people. And then obviously they've been trying to introduce, E3 for the public, E3 for all, and it's wildly expensive to wait in line to play a demo that's, half baked or, E3 baked, which is a whole thing. But let me ask you, do you think E3 is dead or even dying?
I mean, I think we saw the best version of what they're going to be able to get last year. I think, to be fair, I think if you're going to move into this all digital space, you need some hosts to be able to kind of just funnel in the information. I think the biggest actual part of the conversation that came out of E3 that kind of shut the door for them was to see just how well Summer Game Fest did with Jeff Keighley. I think that was the other thing that was in the mix that I still think people are not paying attention to, was that every show that Keighley does at this point is taking that energy away from what E3 used to be, and is now moving in other spaces with the fact that, you know, other publishers are doing their own events. You know, Summer Games Fest is a huge deal that then bumps up into what's the one in overseas, the Gamescom, that bumps into Gamescom.
Yeah.
So they all kind of like run together at this point, and it's kind of like squeezed E3's ability to kind of do that work in the way that they used to, in a real way. So it's changed that conversation in a big way over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I guess. What is it dying though? Is it gonna be dead? Do you think? Is there E3 2023 or 2024?
The version that we all grew up and loved is dead. Okay. Like, that version is no longer a thing of, you know, having the stage shows where you see the big publishers go and the big media outlets go. You know, having that, you know, throng of people bum rushing, you know, stuff to go and go check out things. Like, that version of the show is gone, and to a certain extent should be gone. I don't think that we've seen anything now that has determined, you know, post-COVID or in now current COVID world, of how publishers and PR folks have figured out ways to get that information and those demos and those behind the scenes interviews done now in a way that you can do all that stuff remote. So yeah, I think a lot of that conversation is changing. I think potentially, yeah, E3 might be done in the ways that we thought about it previously.
Yeah, I think definitely the spirit of E3 has been dead. And I think a lot of people might argue that it's been dead for a while.
Yeah.
But I think, going back to what you said about all of these other events, it's exhausting from the press side, because it's like 3 months now, you know, Jeff Grubb's summer game mess, essentially. Which he runs that on his Twitter account and a Discord for it, which is super fun to follow. Just all the different now summer events and spaces people have. You know, we don't need to pay the ESA to go show up in a physical space to do this stuff. But yeah, it should be. As much as it's kind of exhausting, I'm not sad. I don't know. I like going to E3 in person. It's one of the best shows of the year. Yeah. But I'm not super disgruntled about it, because eventually, if things ever do go back to normal, something will either take its place. And my feeling also is that, like, E3 is such a big brand name that I don't think it can ever really truly die. And as long as companies like Microsoft and Nintendo will support it, which they said they were, like last year, there was like a quote from Phil Spencer saying like, hey, we think E3 is important for the industry as a whole and we'll continue to participate. Who knows what that looks like this year, now that they have kind of, you know, they're really good at doing those digital showcases now. So maybe they'll just plan one doesn't happen during that E3 week or whatever.
I mean, for me, I think as a person who for years covered that show on the ground, you know, going hard for a week about, you know, trying to cover as many things as I possibly can. Like, yeah, I am not excited at the fact that the old version of E3 is no longer going to be what it is, but I am excited for the fact that, you know, it's opened up so many different avenues for the way that you cover that show now. Like, you can do collaborative, you know, content in a way that you weren't able to really do before, because you were always ships in the night, kind of passing each other on the floor, trying to get that initial interview or any of that stuff. I would love to hear, you know, head of the ESA, Stanley Pierre-Louis, you know, talk about what this means for them. We had a great conversation with him a couple years ago. Would love to have him come back onto, you know, your platform, our platform, to talk about, like, what do we think that the ESA and E3 is going to look like, and how they've decided to pivot, because they talked about a pivot last year in a way that spoke to them strategizing about, like, what this new kind of version of E3 was going to wind up looking like, and what did they learn from last year, because last year's version of the show, if you ask most people in the space, wasn't great. So I think, you know, what's that new conversation going to be? You know, hopefully Rebecca will track that story down and share it. But if not, I'd love to, you know, see about having that conversation with Stanley directly, to have that stuff kind of come out and be in the mix.
Yeah, and I also wonder about the stuff with the LA Convention Center is interesting, because you have to have a deposit, right? And you have to have, you know, a lot of notice. It's a big facility to kind of book that space. So when they like canceled, I was like, oh, I wonder what this has been doing to like the relationship there, or if like the ESA has one last deposit for like one last E3 or something at the LA Convention Center that they need to cash in on to make the spend worth it. But yeah, I wonder if somebody like that, you know, the head of the ESA would even divulge the type of information that we're like, is your big thing dying? Like, is your big major event showcase like this huge money making?
I mean,
thing?
people ask it. Like, people have been asking him that question for a couple of years now, and he's done a good job of, you know, kind of pivoting the conversation and you know, rerouting that conversation, because you can't really just say this biggest event that we usually throw is now done and we're never going to do it again.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see how they're going to flip it and kind of revamp it to see if, again, last year's version of it that had a couple of hosts and kind of stuff bubbling in.
Some confusing content there too, right? Like they had, they'd mix in panels with keynotes. I forget which panel it was. There was like a diversity panel that it got a real bad rap because people were expecting a keynote and it was like a diversity panel, like a
which
conversation.
I loved actually. Which I loved. I thought that was kind of great. The fact that I don't think they tried to like bamboozle the audience in a way, but it was like, look, you're gonna be here for all this game news. Let's give you something actually to chew on, which I thought was pretty fantastic, and it was a good panel.
It's pretty brave and bold. Yeah, a good panel, but like very bad messaging around what that thing was. Like,
like I just don't think that they really told people exactly what was going to be in terms of their programming and how that was going to land. So expectations have to be fulfilled, but also like good on them for kind of adding some medicine within the sugar that people expected.
Yeah, I guess we could all use a little medicine right now. I think that pretty much covers it as far as E3 goes. Maybe we end on a fun question. Do you have a favorite E3 moment of all time?
Oh God, I mean, to be fair, the stuff we did last, a couple years ago was one of the best things on the planet. Like, I think, getting a chance to interview so many, top-notch folks in the industry, having a dedicated space to do so, feeling very official. And you manufacturing a microphone out of thin air for me was pretty brilliant and amazing. I love that stuff, and I have like massive E3 memories of like E3 was the in 2005 or something like that was my first E3 or something like that, and that was the first time I went on a plane was to go to E3. So wild stories about like what E3 means to me and how that has formulated, all the things that I care about in this industry. So E3 has a very special place in my heart. So it's super cool to see where it's gone, and a little bit of sad to see it potentially go away.
Yeah, it's definitely touched all of our lives who work in the industry. I've been to an E3 before in different ways. You have these memories you hold on to. That last one we did was super fun. That Aaron Greenberg interview that you did was really, really cool. And like some of the shots and stuff we got running around the show floor was definitely super fun. But I always get bitter because that was the first time like we had like gone full throttle, and we kind of there was like a lot of things I wish we did better, and I think we made up for it like at PAX that year later, and we did some really cool things at PAX too. But I'm still bitter because that show kind of left a mark on me, and I feel like I need like some kind of retribution to like do some of the stuff we did, but do it better or do it differently. And now we don't get that chance right now, so we have to wait. Well, the blessing and the curse of all of that is now, one, I have better equipment, and two, I know what to do now when I'm on camera. So it makes it so much easier to not botch it. In the ways that I did before. You and the rest of the team were amazing to work with, and anytime you want to be, anytime I can be your roadie, you let me know and I'm down. Oh yeah, for sure, man. We'll do it up. You have to come back on Inside Gaming. We'll have another chat about whatever's happening. But in the meantime, thanks everybody at home for watching. Drop a comment about your favorite E3 memories, and thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.